Installing FLEX3 wall padding is a simple process that ensures safety and style for your facility. Follow these step-by-step instructions to get your wall padding installed quickly and securely. For additional guidance and printed instructions, be sure to check out our website at www.resilite.com. This installation video for the FLEX3 wall padding uses YouTube chapters for easy navigation. These chapters let you jump to specific points in the video by clicking on the progress bar and/or the description below the video. In addition to your FLEX3 wall padding, the following items are provided by Resilite and come with your purchase. Velcroed furring strips that are 48 inches long by 2.5 inches wide. Non-Velcroed support boards that are also 48 inches long by 2.5 inches wide. And loop pressure sensitive Velcro. We provide enough of each component to complete your entire installation. If you purchase molding and/or outlet inserts, the following will also be included in your package: edge molding, outside corner caps, molding clips, and outlet cover inserts. Before you begin the installation, gather the tools you'll need to complete your installation. Spray adhesive. Resilite recommends 3M Contact Cement 90. Marker and white chalk. Laser. Level or framing square. Chalk line. Tape measure. Electric or cordless drill. Proper screws for wall substrate. Circular saw. Utility knife. Scissors. And a broom. If you purchase molding with your wall padding, you'll also need a staple gun with T50 half-inch staples and a hacksaw. We also recommend using the following safety equipment for the installation of your FLEX3 wall padding: gloves, safety goggles, and earplugs. Measure both the height and the length of your FLEX3 wall padding, and then determine the height you want at the top of the wall padding. Resilite recommends installing the wall padding flush to the floor. However, if not installing flush to the floor, there should be no more than 4 inches from the floor to the bottom of the wall padding. Then, measure and mark the walls for the placement of the furring strips with the Velcro. Each furring strip is 48 inches long by 2.5 inches wide and will be placed on the walls both vertically and horizontally. The vertical furring strips will be attached to the wall first. For vertical chalk lines, strike a plumb vertical line at the start of the padding location, if not starting at an endpoint such as a doorway or corner. This line will give you a square starting point. Horizontally, the furring strips with the Velcro will attach to the wall at the top, middle, and bottom of the mat locations. Snap chalk lines on the wall for each strip. For the top chalk line, measure the height of the foam and strike a line 2.5 inches below the height. The middle chalk line will be 1.25 inches above the center of the mat and will be the top of the center furring strip. Finally, strike a line 2.5 inches up from the floor to mark the top of the bottom furring strip. For example, if you have 72-inch wall padding, the top chalk line would be at 69.5 inches and the middle chalk line would be at 37.25 inches. Remember that foam widths can vary, so measure the foam before striking the line. You are now ready to attach the furring strips to the wall. Vertical furring strips should be installed before the horizontal furring strips. Again, the furring strips are 48 inches long and have Velcro attached, with the Velcro side facing out. Depending on the size of your wall, you may need to cut the furring strips to fit properly. Vertical furring strips need to run from the bottom chalk line to the top chalk line at each edge and corner. Attach the furring strips to the wall using the appropriate screws for substrate. If molding was purchased, the furring strip with the molding attached should be installed at the outermost edges, unless butted up against an inside corner or a doorway. We will show you how to attach the molding in chapters 19 and 20. Horizontal furring strips will run along the chalk lines on the wall. For the top furring strip, the bottom of the strip will be aligned with the top chalk line. And for the middle and bottom furring strips, the top of the strip will be aligned with the chalk lines. Attach the furring strips to the wall using the appropriate screws for substrate. If attaching to drywall, make sure to align the screws with the studs of the wall. If molding was purchased, the furring strip with the molding attached should be installed at the top. We will show you how to attach the molding later in chapters 19 and 20. To complete the framework, center support boards horizontally and in between the horizontal furring strips. Mark chalk lines on the wall 1 1/4 inches above the exact middle of both the top and middle furring strips, as well as the middle and bottom furring strips. Attach the support boards to the wall using appropriate screws for substrate. If attaching to drywall, make sure to align the screws with the studs of the wall. All of the framework for each wall on which you're installing the wall padding should be completed first. Chapters 14 through 18 explain how to frame around outside and inside corners. Your final wall should look something like this. Now it's time to prepare your FLEX3 wall padding for installation by adding Velcro to the back of the padding. Have the back of the wall padding, the side with the slits, facing up, and write the word top in chalk to note the top of the mat so that the mat's orientation is correct when you're placing it on the wall. Next, strike chalk lines on the back of the mat at the exact measurements of the chalk lines you used on the wall. Then spray the adhesive at each of the chalk lines as well as the outside edges of the mat. Allow roughly 5 minutes to allow the adhesive to tack up. Be sure to follow the adhesive instructions on the can for proper usage and ventilation. Once the adhesive is tacky, apply the loop pressure-sensitive Velcro to the back of the wall padding where you sprayed the adhesive. Remove the release paper and press firmly to ensure a secure bond. Once the Velcro is firmly attached to the back of the wall padding, use your knife and cut the Velcro to match all the slits in the padding. Be sure not to cut through the front surface of the mat. This allows the mat to be rolled up for easier installation. Your wall padding is now ready to be installed on the wall. When first aligning the mat with the furring strips, pay close attention to make sure the mat is square on the wall. Carefully roll out a short section while attaching to the wall and check for squareness. If the mat appears to be crooked, simply disengage the mat and start over until a square fit is achieved. Repeat the process on the other walls and wall mats until your room installation is complete. For a continuous look to your wall padding on outside corners, follow these instructions. At this point, the framework should have been completed for all the walls of your installation. If not, follow the steps to complete the framing in chapters 4 to 9. To prepare the wall padding, first you will strike 2 vertical lines with the chalk line on the back of the mat. The first line will be at the location of the corner, and the second line will be 2 3/4 inches beyond the first line. For example, if you're working left to right, the second line will be 2 3/4 inches to the right of the first line. Next, you will measure the thickness of the foam and set the depth of your circular saw to be 1/4 inch greater than the thickness of the foam, because you'll be cutting at an angle. For example, if the foam is 1 5/8 inches thick, the saw should be set to 1 3/4 inches. Also, set the saw to cut at a 48-degree angle. Cut along each chalk line so that you form a V in the back of the mat. If the corner's not square, you may need to adjust your angle. Be sure to not cut completely through the mat. First, with a clean broom, sweep away the remnants of the foam that was left behind from the cutting, or the adhesive will not work. Apply spray adhesive to the outside of each edge of the cut you just created, as well as at the measurements of the furring strips on the wall. Once the adhesive is set for about 5 minutes, apply the loop pressure-sensitive Velcro to the back of the wall padding where you sprayed the adhesive. Remove the release paper and press firmly to ensure a secure bond. Then cut the Velcro at each of the slits as shown in Chapter 12. Your padding is now ready to be installed around the corner of the wall. Follow the same instructions that were used in Chapter 13, making sure to keep everything straight when attaching to the Velcro on the wall. Before placing any furring strips with molding on the wall, you'll need to measure the amount of molding needed. For vertical molding, the length of the vertical edge molding should run the length of the vertical chalk line you placed on the wall in Chapter 3. If necessary, cut the molding with the hacksaw to achieve the proper length. The edge cap to complete the molding installation should be cut to the same length. For horizontal molding, measure the length of the molding needed for the top furring strip. If you're measuring to an inside corner, the molding will need to be 2 inches short of reaching the corner. If necessary, cut the molding with the hacksaw to achieve the proper length. The top cap to complete the molding installation should be cut to the same length. To attach the molding to the furring strips, you will use a staple gun with 1/2-inch staples. Place the molding on top of the furring strip so that the edges are flush. Secure the molding with a staple at every 4 to 6 inches. Once the molding and the furring strips are attached, secure the furring strip to the wall using proper screws for substrate. The screws should go through the flat back of the molding. If attaching to drywall, make sure you align the screws with the studs in the wall. Once the wall padding has been installed, you can complete the installation of your molding. If corner caps were purchased, place those on each corner of the wall padding first. When installing the wall padding, you may need to cut out sections to account for outlets on the wall. Follow these instructions if this applies to you. Measure the placement of the outlet, write them down, and then transfer those measurements to the mat. Cut support boards to size and place around the outside edges of the outlet on the wall. Then, with the chalk, mark the placement of the outlet on the front of the mat to note where the mat will be cut. Next, apply adhesive to both the back of the mat as well as the support boards on the wall. Allow the adhesive to tack up for roughly 5 minutes, and then reapply the mat to the wall. Using your utility knife, cut out the dimensions of the outlet using the marks you placed on the front of the mat. Remove the completed cutout to reveal the outlet. If you purchased outlet cover inserts, center the molding on the wall and trace the inner outside edges. Cut the mat to accommodate for the molding. Apply adhesive to the back of the molding and the inside of the mat cut, and then insert the molding to complete the install. And that's it. Your FLEX3 wall padding is now securely installed. offering top-of-the-line protection and style for your facility. For additional guidance, including an installation manual, visit Resilite.com. Thank you again for choosing Resilite.